Here is an example of an automated API test using Python. I'm going to show you an example using Python, but you can use any of your programming languages to actually write a test. We are testing an API to create a customer. In previous video, I showed that a test case example where we make an API call to create a customer with email and password, and we verify the response. That is actually an API test. You send the request, you get a response, and you check if the response is what you expect, including the status code. So when you're doing it in Postman, that is manual testing, and then you take that and you automate it so you can run it as often as you need. So here I have a Python example that does exactly that test. First, we got a bunch of imports. Then we have credentials that come from the environment as environment variables. You do not want to hard code credentials in your code because your code is going to go into a Git repository. It can be GitHub, GitLab, whatever it is. It's going to be checked into Git, and it's a security issue if you put in your credentials there. There are people actively scanning Git repositories for credentials. So you don't put that there. There's a whole different way of managing credentials. In this case, simple, just environment variables, and I'm picking it up from environment variable. Then I'm creating this authentication auth1 object. Here I am creating a random string and using the random string as the username. So username add email. So we add the domain. So this will create a email address. And I want you to think about it. Why are we doing a random string and not just hard coding an email? Test user 1 or test user 2. Why are we doing that? Put that in the comment why you think that is. Should be pretty straightforward. Then we have password hard coded. So the username is not hard-coded, but the password is hard-coded. Then we create a payload, in this case, to match the exact test we did in the Postman. We're just going to pass in the email and the password in the payload. We got the URL, we got the header, and we make the call. So we use this requests library. That is the most popular library in Python. We make the API call with all that data. We get a response, and the first thing we do is we check the response status code. So if the status code is not 201, then we throw an exception. We raise an exception with appropriate message. Then we get the JSON from the response because JSON is easy to parse. Then basically we're reading the JSON just like manually. When we do it manually here, we visually would look at it with our own eyes, the email, the role, and things like that. Here with code, from the response, we get the email, make sure it's what we expect. We get the username, make sure it's what we expect. We get the role, make sure that it is what we expect. If it's not what we expect, then we raise an exception. Finally, we just print a success message. So this is just a standalone script that will test if this API is working, and this can be expanded to test much more fields in the API. In the next video, I'll create an example of this for a negative test case where you expect the API to fail. So make sure you give me a follow.